Dernière diapo. Pourquoi donner une valeur économique à la nature après ça? Hein? Est-ce que les économistes pourraient sauver les écologistes? Moi, j'y crois. Pourquoi donner une valeur? Alors, c'est, pour moi, il ne faut pas donner une valeur à la nature à tout et pour rien, ça. Mais on doit donner une valeur à la nature pour la prise de décision. Il faut qu'on puisse aider nos décideurs à prendre la bonne décision. Et là, je réfère, par exemple, à mon ministre, qui doit décider si oui ou non il autorise un projet. Prenons, par exemple, une infrastructure portuaire sur le bord de l'estuaire du Saint-Laurent. Est-ce qu'il va autoriser ce projet-là ou il ne l'autorisera pas? Alors, d'un côté, il y a des promoteurs économiques qui disent « Ah, on va avoir des retombées économiques de 1 million de dollars par année. » Et de l'autre, notre ministre dit « Oui, vous les écolos, qu'est-ce que les écologistes, les biologistes du ministère, qu'est-ce que vous dites? Ben, on va perdre la qualité de l'eau, on va perdre le paysage, on va perdre des habitats d'espèces menacées. » Oui, mais si on était capable de dire qu'on va perdre pour 2 millions de dollars de services écologiques, là, la ministre, elle pourrait se retourner et dire aux promoteurs, elle dit, ben regarde, non, la perte est trop grande par rapport au gain. Déménage ton projet à Kakuna, par exemple, là où l'écosystème est déjà dégradé, et là, on va perdre seulement, par exemple, 500 000 $ de services écologiques par année, et on va avoir un gain net positif pour la société. Alors, pour moi, ce n'est qu'à ce niveau-là qu'on doit mettre une valeur économique. On ne doit pas se mettre à acheter la nature et tout ça, mais pour arriver à ça, pour développer ces outils-là, de donner valeur, il faut, ça prend des scientifiques, ça prend des modèles, et c'est extrêmement complexe. On commence un petit peu à avoir des idées de la valeur économique, mais les économistes, ils ont du travail à faire. Les écologistes aussi. Alors, ça termine ma présentation, et je vous souhaite un bon colloque. Merci beaucoup.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very conscious that we are getting closer to the break time, so I'm going to try to stick to my 10 minutes. Introducing you some elements about business and biodiversity. First, I would like to emphasize that when we think about business and biodiversity, the link is generally business destroys biodiversity, which has been true for so many years. What I'm going to introduce and try to introduce for you is that there can be another link where business can also contribute to some extent to the reach or to attaining the CBD objectives. And also in the second part of my presentation, present you the compendium as Nancy was introducing, which was created by the Canadian Business and Biodiversity Council, where Deloitte was one of the founders of this initiative here in Montreal. So the business case for biodiversity, why are companies more and more getting concerned by biodiversity? In particular, this is a trend that has been here for the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years. I think it's in the COP8 in Brazil, where one of the decisions of the resolution of the COP underlines the role of businesses in the achievement of biodiversity objective. It can be quite surprising that since 1982, the role of businesses was not so emphasized by governments and members and parties. But in 2006 and again in Bonn in 2008, this was still further emphasized, and it's going to be in Nagoya this year in 2010, one of the main topics, how business can contribute to let's say, change the curve of the biodiversity loss, if possible. Now, in the WEF, in the World Economic Forum this year in January, there was, I think it was in January, yeah, there has been a report that you can see here, Business and Biodiversity Risk, where biodiversity loss is clearly identified as one of the risks for businesses and economy as a whole. And what you can see also is that biodiversity loss in 2010 has been ranked higher than it was ranked the previous year in terms of severity and also in terms of probability. So, and then if you look at also water scarcity, which is quite high in the ranking, so the destruction of ecosystem services is getting higher, definitely on the business agenda. Not as high as the oil spike yet, but one day. Now, why business should or are starting to get concerned about the biodiversity loss? It's because businesses impacts, as we said, biodiversity, but they also depend on it. So there's this new concept about impact and dependence of business activities on ecosystem services and biodiversity as a whole. As you can see here is the link between biodiversity of species, of genes and ecosystems and human well-being, which has been beautifully presented with the different speakers. Now, if we look on the top of the box, you can see that businesses' activities are impacting all these ecosystem services and biodiversity, but they also relying on it, and therefore the changes in the ecosystems and the biodiversity quality are affecting the ability for our businesses to carry out their activities, and this is where they start to give a larger ear to what's going on. Now, what kind of businesses or what kind of sectors are impacted? Many of them, and in different ways. Some companies or some sectors, are impacted in terms of resources availability, of the sustainable sourcing of the resources. We can think about water treatment or even mining operation or any operation that requires water. But also some industries like cosmetic industries who are using vegetable raw materials, and some of them are from wild backgrounds, wild areas, so they do need to have a sustainable sourcing of those vegetable raw materials in order to be able to continue selling their products. I'm thinking about one of the examples that I will present later, L'Oréal sourcing argan oil from Morocco. They have implemented a sustainable sourcing strategy of 100% of the argan oil that is coming from Morocco, from a protected area actually in the south of Morocco. But also another way that businesses are impacted is on their reputation. Not taking care of biodiversity and ecosystem services now can be costly for a company in terms of license to operate and in terms of reputations. And I would say thanks to activists group, which are largely pinpointing some of their activity. You might have in mind some actions from Greenpeace against Nestle regarding the palm oil production, or also Greenpeace against some paper companies regarding boreal forest, which led to a successful agreement between the forestry industry and the environmental NGOs. So more and more there are these kind of leverage or drivers that are leading companies to take care of ecosystem services and biodiversity. So I've here presented some sectors which are impacted. You might be surprised to find also the finance sector, but like sustainable, socially responsible investment also integrate more and more some biodiversity aspects. And IFCs, for instance, the International Finance Corporation, is having in its procedures some guidance on the protection of biodiversity. So it can be also a condition for a company to get money to go out and implement their operations. Now, there are different tools and methodologies to give valuation to the biodiversity, and we've already mentioned quite a few times the economics of ecosystem and biodiversity. So I won't dig on that. And there is also this interesting tool from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the World Resource Institute, which is the Corporate Ecosystem Service Review that some companies have already used, which is meant to actually assess the impacts and dependence of company or company operations on ecosystems and biodiversity. It's a first step. It's certainly not exhaustive. I mean, it certainly requires the knowledge of scientists to be able to ensure that we actually measure the real impacts and real dependencies. But it's a good start to have an overview of impacts and dependence of businesses. So So yeah, here you have the cover of the tools. Yes, there are different tools and guidelines. Other actions that business are starting to implement. It's also partnerships and engagement with stakeholders like NGOs, like scientists, to be able to monitor, to have a kind of a thorough diagnosis of what are the impacts of their activities on biodiversity, and to maintain a monitoring of those. And there are also, as was mentioned, some markets now for ecosystems. The Alberta province have worked a lot on that, on ecosystem services and marketing ecosystem services. But this is all under development. Now, the Canadian Business and Biodiversity Council was created in the fall in 2008, so it's quite recent. There was a first conference in Montreal about business and biodiversity, and following that that conference, stakeholders realized that there was a need to create a multi-stakeholder platform at federal level that would help or that would foster maybe the implication of businesses together with their stakeholders, to showcase good practices, to share knowledge, and to show that, to create a momentum for businesses to integrate more and more biodiversity in their operations. So there's a website that you can go and visit, and there is a steering committee who is composed of representatives from different groups, in particular Environment Canada. Nancy's directorate is represented. It's chaired by Jo Angelina, who is partner at Deloitte and who is a previous commissioner at the sustainable development at federal level. And there are a series of business representatives, institutes. CBD, the secretariat, is also part of the steering committee, and some universities, and so that it's been on for 2 years now, and the very latest production is this compendium that showcases 17 case studies of good practices in terms of business and biodiversity. That is, companies that have implemented projects or programs or policies to help conserving biodiversity. So the examples are from different sectors, 9 sectors altogether, and also different types of examples. Some of them are research projects, some of them, as I said, are sourcing projects, some of them are implementing a policy, and like it might sound quite obvious to implement a policy in terms of biodiversity conservation, but for international companies having so many hundreds of operations around the world, it is a challenge to have a policy, set objective, set management rules, and train the managers to ensure that biodiversity is part of their agenda. So it is a good practice. I mean, of course, we could say it's the minimum they can do, but it's something that is now taking shape within companies. So for the moment, it's a good practice. Let's hope that one day it's going to be like, business as usual to have a biodiversity policy, of course. So there is also a guidelines which is about to be issued sometimes in October, hopefully before COP10, and different projects like a biodiversity award and other projects that will continue. So this is what the Canadian Business and Biodiversity Council has been implemented so far. As a word of conclusion, what I would like to say is that this is quite recent. There's a need to really create and sustain the momentum of business implication in ecosystems protection and biodiversity conservation. And my personal view is that it's really through stakeholder engagement and putting together the knowledge of scientists, the involvement and I would say the insights of NGOs and activist groups, and also the resources of businesses, that we can actually have more chance to inflect the curve of biodiversity loss. Thank you for your attention.